I've never been happier, and the relationship I have with my wife is a huge reason for that. But let me tell you, it wasn't always this way. I spent 9 years in a relationship that just drained me, leaving me feeling isolated and alone. And I'm pretty sure my partner at the time felt the exact same way. It's surprising how two relationships can seem so similar on the surface. There's love, kindness and compassion, happy memories, deep connections, and shared stories that I'll cherish forever. But beneath the surface, things were very different. Even when a relationship brings joy, it can also be a source of major pain in our lives. A lot of people stay in these relationships because they're just afraid of being alone. Maybe the relationship just comes with too many perks, like social connections or an easy life. Or maybe they're ready to take action, but they just don't know what to do. In this video, I want to cover off 5 signs that you can be on the lookout for today, which may be a signal that your relationship is currently making you less happy rather than more. If you're new here, my name is Shane, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I just love creating systems and tools that you can use to make your life happier than you ever thought possible. But with all that said, let's get into today's video. This one feels like it might be obvious because most of us have been on those first dates where you're really feeling it and you're connecting with the other person, but you just know that they're not in that same place. That's a shame, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about relationships that are a few years old. Maybe you've been together 2 or 3 years and you really know one another. Because in those relationships, it's not immediately obvious when it's one-sided. Because both of you might be putting in a lot of effort. You're obviously doing your part, but your partner may also be trying to do theirs too. But if those things that they're doing aren't actually the things that you need, it doesn't matter. You're going to feel like it's one-sided because you're not getting what you need out of that relationship. As an example, let's just say that you're somebody who really values close contact. That might be sitting down and actually cuddling up and watching TV, or maybe spending time in bed on a Saturday or Sunday morning. If your partner doesn't put the same value in those types of things and instead has a lot of value in gardening, they may spend a huge amount of time in the garden creating a nice environment for you and them to enjoy, thinking that that's something that you want. But because that's not aligned with your values and it's not something that you actually appreciate, it doesn't matter how much effort or energy or time they invest into this part of the relationship. If it's not giving you value and it doesn't make you feel appreciated, that is being one-sided. These types of conversations can be incredibly difficult to navigate because ultimately what you're trying to do is say to somebody that all the effort and energy that they are actually investing into your relationship isn't having an impact and in fact is a complete waste of time. And that sometimes can be quite difficult to navigate if you're not really sure how to communicate that point across in a way that is constructive. Most of us are a little bit reserved when it comes to our everyday life. Sure, some of us, like myself, can be more of an open book than others, but more often than not, a lot of people, if not most, will have elements of their life that they have public facing and other elements that are privately facing. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, and actually I tend to think that's a good thing, because the people who you are closest with and you can open up with, it just allows them to connect with you even deeper and makes them feel a little bit special that you're sharing things that you aren't comfortable sharing with the wider general public. But this can become a problem when you realize that actually one of the people you're uncomfortable sharing this information with is the person who you're supposed to be closest to, and that is the person who you're in this relationship with. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. Maybe in the past you told them something and they ended up laughing at you and making you feel silly, or they told some of their friends and ended up breaking your trust. At the end of the day though, it doesn't matter. If you're in a position where you're hiding elements of your life from this person who you're supposed to be closest with, that's going to create a tension. That's going to make you feel like this relationship is more one-sided than maybe it actually is. If you end up hiding some of these facts about yourself from the person you're supposed to be closest to, that's going to ultimately come at a cost. For most people, that's going to materialize as a feeling of being uncomfortable in your own skin. You've been in this position where you've shared a fact about yourself that you don't want to share with most people, and that didn't get received very well. And so what ultimately happens is you become afraid of sharing these facts with other people and afraid of being your true self in public. And now what you're doing is you're going through life with a mask on, trying to portray this image that you think will be received well, and that is absolutely exhausting. It takes so much effort that if you're doing that for more than a few days, what you're going to be left with is this feeling of being empty, of not being your true self. That's a million miles away from the positive result you're actually looking for this relationship to bring to your life, isn't it? In any relationship, there's going to be times when you're going to have a difficult conversation. That might be communicating some bad news, or telling something that they've done something you don't like, or asking them to do things differently in the future. These situations always suck, and chances are you're a good person and not an absolutely terrible human being, so there's always going to be an element of picking and choosing your words to minimize the impact that you're going to have on this other person. But picking and choosing your words to minimize the pain you cause to somebody else is a million miles away from actually picking and choosing those words instead to avoid an argument. What usually ends up happening is we start getting this ball of anxiety building up over time as we know the conversation has to happen. That means we kick it down the road and we don't have the conversation because we know that when we do, we're just going to be getting into an argument. And it's very difficult to have a conversation when you know that the end result is just going to be a fight. Now, some of this is actually on you, because until you actually have that conversation, you don't know how they're going to react. And so there is an element of it's actually a little bit unfair on this other person to assume that they're going to react negatively and that it's going to be blown completely out of proportion. More often than not though, your gut feeling is probably pretty accurate. And if this has happened before, it's probably going to happen again in the future. And so now this is unfair on you, because now you're left dealing with this issue in isolation, on your own, trying to keep the lid on this problem. All in all, putting you under stress, trying to deal with something alone that really should be dealt with together. There's two of you in this relationship and two of you responsible for solving the problem, and now you're left on your own trying to navigate this without any support. This thing that's supposed to be incredibly positive and supportive in your life has now just given you another problem, and that is definitely a recipe to increase your overall level of unhappiness. We've all been there. The relationship is wearing thin and you know it's only going one way. You know for a fact that the other person feels the same, and you're like two ships in the night as you go through the house trying to avoid one another just to stay out of each other's way. But you've got this big wedding coming up next week, and so it's probably best to actually wait until after that so it's not awkward on the day. You both have to go, and we'll just wait till next week and we'll have that conversation next week. But then wedding day comes and lo and behold, everything seems great. You don't know whether it was the change in scenery or being around your friends or maybe even just having a few drinks, but before you know it, you're actually having a really good time and you're laughing and joking, and it feels like back in the early days, back when you started dating. And now you're thinking, maybe that idea of breaking up was a little bit premature, and you just put it on the back burner for a minute. Having a great publicly facing side of your relationship is definitely important, and I don't want to undersell that, but it can't come at the cost of the privately facing relationship. The reality is that you're going to spend most of your time together on your own. And so if that positive public facing image is masking a problem that's happening behind closed doors, well, that's going to be a recipe for disaster if you don't tackle it head on and do something to put it to bed once and for all. This one actually drives me insane, and I don't know if it's an Irish thing, because here in Ireland I hear it at least multiple times per week. Culturally, it just seems to be accepted, and I really don't think that people know the impact, negative, that this can have on the other person that they're in a relationship with. What am I talking about? Passively putting you down. Peter's useless at that, and I can't for the life of him get him to do anything with it. Sure, what would she know? You'd be better off getting the dog to do it, she just doesn't have a clue. Jeez, the wife's driving me mad. She's looking to go furniture shopping this weekend and she just hasn't let up about it. Chances are they don't mean any harm and there's probably no weight in what they're saying. But not intending to have a negative impact doesn't mean that there isn't one there. And generally this will come across in one of two ways. Obviously, the more you hear negative things being said about you, the more you're actually going to believe them yourself. But also, the more they're going to start believing them too. Even if all of these things are meant as a joke, all it does is build up this tension within the relationship, underselling the positives and drastically overselling the negatives. Personally, in the relationship that I have with my wife and I, we never do this, and the positive impact it's had cannot be undersold. And actually, we ended up doubling down on this because, again, while we never actually had an active conversation saying that this is what we were going to do, in those situations where most people would start spewing negativity about their partner, we actually use that as a springboard to talk about the things that we love about our partner the most. This is incredibly positive, but more than that, it actually completely and utterly solidified my thinking when it comes to just how bad talking negatively about our partners can really be. Being in a bad relationship sucks, and I really hope none of you watching are in a bad relationship, because building up that energy to actually take action and leave that relationship can be incredibly challenging. But if anything that we talked about today has resonated, well then you might have a little bit of thinking to do to determine if actually you are in this space or not. Of course, there might be some positives in this relationship that you don't want to lose out on, but the reality is that if some of the points discussed today are really starting to resonate with you, do you really want to settle for a relationship that may be subpar, especially when it's the one that should be bringing you the most happiness in your life? But that's today's video. I'd love to know what you think, so let me know down in the comments below. And if you really like that, you might like this one as well. But with all that said and done, that's this week's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great week, folks. Peace.